I mean, I suppose I entered voice dialogue from the perspective really of, here's another personal growth therapeutic tool that I wanted to work with for myself and learn how to apply. And it wasn't really until I went over to Thera the first time to be with Helen Sidra that I kind of really thought of it, had a concept, much of it as a consciousness tool or as a psycho-spiritual practice. I mean, my spiritual journey's actually been a very strong part of my life, and I had a long period where I was in a particular form of meditation, and I had a guru, and I went and lived in India and really immersed myself in that, and even Aikido, which I did for many years, and and I used to train a bit together, was for me also a spiritual practice. It wasn't just a martial art. But it was interesting because when I went there and Hal was very clearly in that place, for him especially, voice dialogue is a consciousness process. That's what it's essentially about for him. He doesn't see it as a therapy. I mean, he knows it's used as a therapy and all those kind of things. And that kind of sealed the deal for me. It was like, oh yeah, and it's interesting just sort of looking at on the first day I talked about this idea of the theory, some of the theory in the 3 levels of consciousness. And really, in a way, that very much mirrors some of the traditional Advaita and Kashmir Shaivism philosophy, which some of the traditional Hindu philosophies that informed the meditation practice that I was involved with, and it's the idea that we basically come out of this consciousness, this oneness, which is that overall level of consciousness, and then we go into duality, which is the selves. Really. The primary and dissonant selves, the polarities, because this is a world of duality that we live in, and then from the meditation perspective, I guess the interesting difference there was, for me, meditation practices were always about, the ones that I did were always in a sense about rising above the personality. It was something to get beyond, and I quite easily go into a meditative state, not that I'm, even now, I'm not a regular meditator, I'm very intermittent, but when I do meditate, it's quite easy for me to get into that transpersonal kind of state. But I guess for me the issue was, I'm still got to deal with my personality, unless I'm going to go and live in an ashram or a monastery, and even then I've still got to deal with my personality, but living in the world especially. And so for me, part of the journey, especially at the moment, is around, the development of the aware ego process. And for me, as I separate more from primary selves, as I get more an awareness of primary selves and disowned selves and polarities, and expand this capacity to actually be with those, to me, then I actually feel my consciousness expanding as well, and that's my spiritual path at the moment, in a way. So it has, obviously it's got the personal and the interpersonal level for me. Of course, and the vulnerable child, which is always there, and dealing with that. But there's also this level in which, through this process, and also the dreams are a big part of that I do experience consciousness as a unifying force. And it's hard for me to kind of say much more about that, because it's almost like when I peel away the layers of my personality, that's what's left. That for me, that's my experience. It's a direct experience of that oneness. And of course, I pop in and out of that, because usually I'm in a self at some point, most of the time. Yeah, so I guess that's a really important application for me, or it's not even an application, it's more a way that I engage with voice dialogue is with that kind of understanding of what I'm doing. It's a way I deal with myself, it's a way I deal with my relationships and the bonding patterns, but it's also a way of embracing this level of consciousness and spirituality for me.
I'm wondering, in this life here as a human, can we actually be not in the self? Because if we are in the aware ego, there's just nothing, and there's also no action, or is it even possible not to be in a self?
It's not just passive, it is also active.
Yeah.
There is the possibility to be in an aware ego process and be talking to somebody and engaging with someone, and you're still kind of in that place and you're bringing energies in through you. Mm-hmm. So it's not just awareness, that's why we're saying it has that third element of action and engagement. So if I'm communicating from an aware ego process, that can include, for example, a polarity. So yes, there are selves, but they're coming through me. So there's it's like a witnessing, it's an interesting experience, because it is an experience of a duality, and nearly like channeling in some way, because I'm channeling two different energies, like we were doing with the exercise that we've been doing before. Mm-hmm. It's tricky because you don't know. The moment you say, I'm in a aware ego now, it's like,
Yeah, I mean, one way that I experience the aware ego process is that when I have a separation from a self, or selves, it's what's left over almost. It's where I'm at when I'm not in those. And so it's not something that I can necessarily just kind of conjure up like that and go, I'm in an aware ego process now. The idea that it's a process is really important. Like, there's been consciously added, there was aware ego, and then there's aware ego process, and it is a process that we're engaging in, that we come in and out of, really.
For me, the people that know me longer, it's been such a intense process for me around, is voice dialogue just working with personality? And if it is, do I really want to do that? At some stage I got to that point of going, that is just too narrow for me and too flat for me. And then I was having all these discussions with Hull about, is being or the transpersonal just a part? And we had a phase of going through those discussions. And then for me what became clear is that the process itself is a transformational process. Like, if you really look at what we're doing when we're doing voice dialogue, we are doing things like, this is me, and then we're doing, no, that's not me, that's just a part of me, and because I have that part, and so I have that part, and then, oh no, but I actually got an opposite part, okay, so now I've got two parts, and there's another one, so I'm doing this number, I'm going, something that I thought it was me is actually out here, out there, I can look at it, I can feel it, I can disidentify, I can move it in and out. So if that's the case, then what's left? Like, who's this me then that's doing all this watching, disidentifying, moving in and out? And then you start to kind of go, well, I don't really know who that is. Because the moment I can name it, then I can make it a part and I can move it out of myself. So to me that's who am I? That's Ramana Maharshi, that's all that whole process of keep questioning who am I, and the more I ask who am I, the less I know who I am, and the more the spaciousness opens up. So that in itself for me is a spiritual transformational process. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that when I am facilitating and I'm working with people, there are these moments when people suddenly pop through an energy, and there's this spaciousness that opens up. And I think most of you have experienced that and have a contact to that, where suddenly everything that the whole personality seems something else, and I'm somewhere else, and I'm beyond that, and I'm not part of that. And so I described that, and the article that's in the anthology describes that. And it's that bit that I'm really still very interested in developing in the work, like how to bring that in more deliberately, and how to teach facilitators, how to teach you to be able to spot that and take people deeper into that. And that's still not quite. I'm still not quite sure how I can do that. It means that it obviously means you have to be able to inhabit that place. So one of the things I thought of is for us to have some time, this afternoon, to see how do we find that place in us. What is it that you do that makes you access that? And so when you have more access to that, more deliberate access to that, then how can you, when you're working with someone, and you are wanting to make this part of your practice, you're wanting to make this part of what you're doing with people. And personally, I think it's incredibly valuable because it is one of the major resources that, the connection to the transpersonal is one of the major resources for people to be able to deal with their personality, to be happy to inhabit personality. Because like when we were doing the gang the other day, you could feel the heaviness and the density and the trappedness and the kind of the attraction. It's like a magnet, like how we get pulled into that. And there are parts of the personality like playfulness and vulnerability and the rebel and the freedom voice and spirituality. There are all these different parts that can make it easier to have this density. But there's also a major energy within us that is always present. That's the other thing I notice, that for all of us, it's actually not an energy that is ever gone. We go away from it. We go into story and attachment to what we think is going on, and we are so addicted to story, But once you realize that it's there, it's just that it's a practice of finding it again and again in a day-to-day environment, in just sitting here and knowing that it's just here, and all I have to do is, like, for some people when they do sessions and they realize it's behind them, it's like leaning back. I've done some sessions with people where it was just all you have to do is lean back, and there it is. And that's why I call it a resource. It's really the memory that we're not just a human being, and that we can move in and out between, being a human being, doing what we're doing, having our bonding patterns and our enmeshment and all this stuff, and at the same time there's always that sense of depth and spaciousness just there. And ultimately that's what I think the real gift is of voice dialogue. I feel that it's just an amazing tool to have access to it. And I think if you bring that into your practice with people, it just brings in such depth. So I find it incredibly important. So it's like nearly like I was going to say, it's a being with a big B. I was nearly going to say that. Like there is a polarity of being and doing, but I'm talking about something that's a bit vaster. It has an archetypalness feeling about it. It's kind of a really big space in some way. Whereas being can be, I think if you do being and then you expand it, you get there. And so the way I love working with it too is when people are actually in being, that I then engage them in doing. So when people in the sessions, so this is what I call transpersonal dialogue, when people in the sessions are in that kind of spaciousness, and usually what happens is people get really careful because they think, like, if I move or say or think, then I'm going to lose that. So we have this kind of tendency to be really precious about, oh my God, I'm feeling being now, I'm feeling expanded now, so I've got to be really careful. And it's actually possible. So what I tend to do is kind of go, okay, so let's see if we can talk. Let's see if you can walk around. What happens if you have a thought? Can you have a thought? Can you think about something and still be in this expanded space? Because that's the practice of being a human being and being in the world and doing stuff and still being in that spaciousness. So for me, that's when I call it more transpersonal dialogue, because it kind of veers away a bit from voice dialogue, because I'm actually directing and doing things, stuff like that.